and welcome to my channel. My name is Victoria and I am a Christian, feminist, and queer person interested in talking about faith in the modern world. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about whether or not it's worth coming out if doing so might wreck your whole family. That sounds really dramatic, but when you come from a really conservative family, it's a very real possibility and something that has been really on my mind this last year as I have come out to everyone. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts and sharing yours, then keep watching. In my last video, someone called this t-shirt too provocative and told me to take off my leftist costume. So I've decided to make it my permanent filming shirt for this channel. You're welcome. Okay, let's get into the video. I want to say that this is a really difficult question. I think on the one hand, the secular narrative is very prominent with the whole live your best life, like you do you know, you'll resent your family if you don't ever tell them, you need to like live into your identity, and I think that there is some truth there. But I think that it's more complicated than that, especially as followers of Christ, when one of our primary goals is to bring peace and keep peace in the world. So that to say, I have my thoughts based on my own experience, but I would never want you to feel like I'm telling you this is how it has to be or this is what you should do. I think it very much does depend on your circumstance, especially if you're in a context where it might not be safe to come out. So those are all things to keep in mind. I'm going to share with you some of my story and my thoughts, but by no means do I think that this is necessarily what's best for everyone. So as someone who's bi, this is a question that I've thought about a lot because my family is all very conservative and most of them don't think that being gay is morally right. So growing up, once I started to kind of think that I might be interested in women and sort of acknowledge that maybe I'm okay with that and that's something I might do something about. Even when I was thinking I was more comfortable with that idea, I always had the thought that it would be easier if I could just fall in love with a man. So like I was never sure even when I recognized my own sexuality and even when I was comfortable with that, I still had the thought that like maybe I still would never come out or tell anyone or do anything about it because, you know, my family wouldn't be approving, and if there was still hope for me to find a man or to be happy being single, then that would be the easier path. I could have children naturally if I wanted, and I could, you know, my family would celebrate the family that I was building and no feathers would be ruffled, even though I am by nature a feather ruffler. As well, I was never interested in anyone specific, so the whole idea of my sexuality was very abstract and kind of seemed irrelevant most of the time. Beyond my family, I was also leading in a church that was not affirming and was doing and am doing a theology degree at a college which actively tries to teach that being gay is not in line with the Bible. So all those things to say, there were a lot of reasons why I didn't think that I would ever come out, or at least didn't think right now it was relevant or that it would be easier and not harmful. Like I think it can be very harmful for people to stay in the closet, but for me, I wasn't interested in anyone. I liked the things I was doing with my time. And I am quite close with my family, so I thought that if I ever did, you know, date someone or have a family, I would want them to be really involved. So naturally that meant being with a man was a lot easier. I just kind of thought in light of all of the hate that I would get and in light of all of the areas of my life that I would disrupt and have to potentially leave, it just wasn't worth it at the time, so I didn't tell anyone. I just thought it would be easier to wait for a man and live happily ever after instead of exploding everything in my life. And I think it's really valid to feel that way. I don't think that you necessarily have to come out. You know, it can be unsafe, you can upset people you love, and like I said, I think that keeping peace in the world is one of our primary callings as Christ followers. So it's a very complicated issue. It's trying to balance that. To what extent do I live to satisfy my own desires, and to what extent do I live to serve those around me? And I think that is the heart of the issue and what makes it so difficult. On the other hand, life almost never happens as we expect it will, and change only happens when we disrupt the status quo. In my case, thinking about whether or not it was worth coming out, I actually didn't choose to come out. I was kind of forced out, which I will also get into in another video, but it kind of happened accidentally and I had to deal with it. But that said, kind of my thoughts on whether it's worth coming out are looking back with hindsight, and I certainly don't regret what happened, and I'm very glad that I am out and where I'm at now. It makes me able to do videos like this to hopefully help somebody else that might be struggling. Basically, the summary of what happened was I was leading in my church, which, as I said, was not an affirming community. I will give the full story, like I said, in another video. But essentially what happened was I met a girl in my church who was also interested in women, and she was less confident on the whole moral side of things, so she ended up telling the church leaders. And so because my parents were involved, my dad is on the board, I was worried they would find out through other people, so I had to tell them and I had to come out, and huzzah, it happened. Like I said though, I have no regrets about that. I'm very glad with where I'm at now, and I kind of want to give my perspective now on the other side. Was it worth it? How has the family drama been since then? Christmas was especially hard. There was a lot of drama. I was newly out. My gay uncle was in town, and I have a gay cousin, and him and his boyfriend were around. So there's kind of us three, and then on the other hand, a lot of traditional conservatives, and so, as you can imagine, lots of explosive conversations. But there are kind of two primary reasons I want to talk about which made coming out the right decision for me and what made it worthwhile. The first reason is falling in love. Before I fell in love with a woman, I kind of thought my attraction to them didn't really matter so much because, like I said, I could have met a man. At that point, there was no one in particular, so it just didn't really matter in the day-to-day living of my life. But I ended up falling in love with a woman, and everything changed. I had never before felt love like that, where it was soul deep and had this sense of, like, I don't know, destiny? I know that's super cheesy, but like I felt so deeply that everything that I was made to love her. Like, I don't know, we just fit perfectly and complemented each other perfectly. And yeah, it was like this strange feeling of like, I just suddenly feel like my whole life has led me to this point of existing to love you. And she was the one that I wanted to spend my life with and take on the world with. So when that happened, the idea of being with a man or waiting for a man didn't make sense anymore. And it wasn't like I suddenly realized that I was just like 100% gay, like I still identify as bi, but it was just more like, this was my soulmate, so it was her or nobody. I came to a place over the course of our relationship where I just couldn't imagine myself with anyone else and didn't want to live my life without her. And even like in that weird destiny sense, felt like I wasn't supposed to live my life without her. And so it wasn't as though I was suddenly okay with hurting my family, or that it was a question of putting her before them or choosing her over them, but it was just more like, I don't know, when you experience a love that deep, that person becomes your person. I don't know. But I guess like the feeling was so deep that it kind of became the primary motivator in how I was going to live my life and make decisions. And I obviously love my family, and I couldn't imagine my life without them either. But essentially that's how I came to feel, so that's how I acted. That's why I was comfortable with the idea of telling people in my life who I never thought that I would tell before, because my gayness was more of a reality at that point, although it's not like you're not gay if you don't date someone of the same sex. Like, that's bi erasure, I don't want to do that. But the point is that I wanted to go forward with this, and it seemed worth it to me because that was the greatest love I've felt on earth, other than the Lord. The second reason that I think coming out was worth it for me was that I think that you can't make change unless you're willing to disrupt the status quo. Even though I feel that we're called to create peace, I think that when the status quo is oppressive, we are called to break it, and breaking it will naturally feel like breaking the peace because we are disrupting the structures that exist. I think that just as much as keeping peace is our job as Christians, I think that fighting against injustice, even if it means breaking the peace, is also just as much our calling. I think arguments can change people's minds. Actually, that's how I became affirming, was through research and reading various arguments on the subject. But I think that firsthand experience can be even more significant. Like with my parents, we've been having conversations about this for years and tossing ideas back and forth about what the Bible really says and what that means in our lives. But I think what was most striking to my mom was actually seeing me in pain over the way some people in the church treated me, and seeing me heartbroken over this girl. And I think even more than the personal stuff, carving out a space for yourself in society actually helps carve out a space for other people like you. I'm still very early in my journey, so I'm not sure that that's necessarily happened yet, but I hope as I walk forward more openly sharing my story and my thoughts, that others might feel less alone, and people who do take a hard line against homosexuality might have their hearts and minds softened. Even if certain members of my family never agree with me and never celebrate me and my possible relationships going forward, I still feel like challenging their worldview and their perceptions will force them to at least rethink what they believe, or maybe be more aware that what some of the things that they say and do actually are very hurtful, even if it's done in the name of love. I hope that through interacting with me, maybe some of the things they might learn can translate into the way they treat all queer people, and that there may be more grace as a result. I think that if you believe someone's actions or beliefs are truly damaging, letting it slide to preserve your own relationship with them can actually do as much to damage the wider world beyond your family context. It's a hard road and a sad road, I won't deny that. I think that if I did marry a woman, a large portion of my family would not come to the wedding. And so there would always be that kind of shadow of loss over our relationship. But I do think it's still worth it because of the love that can grow between partners and also the change that can happen for the wider society, especially in the church. I think change is most often painful, but it's also necessary and good in the long run. That said, this is also my experience and you know your context best. And certainly I think that if it would be unsafe for you to come out, then probably not a good idea. So those are my thoughts on is it worth it to come out if it wrecks your family. I hope you enjoyed this little chat style video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.